So today what we're going to do to begin is I'm going to use some mixed media paper, and this is 9 by 12, which will come in handy because when I do the outside edges I can use just the strips of the 12 inches. But then I'm also going to be using this back portion as a base because this is about 350 pound weight. And I got this at a local craft store, and you can also get these online, but I really like mixed media paper because it's nice and smooth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this back portion, and what I've done is I've undercoated it with the orange color. I'm going to be using the bronze from the DecoArt Extreme Machine, but you can also use bronze from metallics. Now I want to show you that they're just a little bit different in color. So the bronze from metallics is a little bit more orange. This is a little bit more golden. So I have traditional burnt sienna and rich espresso, and we're going to just make that burnt sienna a little bit metallic. And we're going to shade our pumpkin. Okay, I'm going to begin floating, or another term for this is siloting. And what happens when you put the metallic into the traditional burnt sienna is it's going to make it a little bit transparent. And I can tell I'm going to have to repeat this because of that. We want it to be nice and soft, but we do not want it to look all streaky. And I think I may need to shake my rich espresso again and then mix them again. I'll see how this dries. Okay. I came in a second time and now the floats look nice and smooth. So now I'm going to come in along the outside edges too, which I forgot to do. I want to make sure my floats are nice and dry that I already put down. And I'll come along the bottom. So I'm just doing the whole outside edge. Like that. Now I have burnt umber, which is a little bit darker. And I'm going to go right along the edges to deepen them up a little. It's burnt umber plus rich espresso mixed together. Just like the first shade was the traditional burnt sienna mixed with the rich espresso. Okay, I'm going to come in with a little bit of Splendid Gold on the outside edges here. I'm dry brushing them in first, and then I'll reinforce it with a float. That's along the very edge out there. I'm not going to put anything here. Now the mask is going to be here, so I want to make sure I get the most color in this area here. And I'm not sure if you can see that or not. But it's definitely showing in mine. And again, we'll go along the outside edge over here. And nothing on the outside. I have Splendid Gold Metallic in my brush, and now I'm going right to that outside edge and reinforcing the area that was dry brushed. So I'm just walking this out now. So my shadows have gotten a little bit dull looking, so I'm going to take the original bronze, really work it into my brush, and just go over these shades to soften them and make them look a little bit more metallic. I don't want to lose the metal look. And I'm keeping these very soft because I don't want to undo the shading that I've done too. We're going to come in and we're going to dry brush the highlights to the hat with neutral gray, and I'm using one of my Monza round dry brushes. This is a size 8 and it's from my Creative Blending set. And I've got the line on for the top of the hat, and I'm going to just scoot this right up to that line. And then I'm going to come in and use circular motions. And then I'm going to go along the outside edge and allow this to fade away. I ran out of paint, and the good thing is it's very dry here and I'm painting on paper, so this pretty much is dry. So I'm going to just go in and reinforce it and then soften the outside edges. Let that dry a little bit, and I'm going to turn the head around, and we'll come in and put a highlight over here. I'm trying hard not to get it on the gold, but if I have to, I will just touch up the gold hat band. pretty good. I need to do some more blending in here. There's a little bit of the background coming in. So I'm going to add this a third time. All the same color. Okay. And I think this got a little bit too white, so I've got the graphite, and I just put graphite in my brush, and I'm going to blend over these areas. The base coat color was graphite, and I just want to make sure that my highlight does not get too big. And you can go back and forth like that with your colors. And I'm going to come in with, and I'm going to meet the highlight right here. And we're going to bring it back in this direction. And so this is kind of going on an angle because the hat's more of a flat plane. The top of the hat's more of a flat plane. This part is more of a cylinder. And this is just a curved flat plane. So I want to bring that all the way down to the edge. Now we're going to take the neutral gray and we're going to shade underneath here. And this is the rim of the hat, And this is the highlight color that I used on the hat. Right now it's shading the rest of the rim. I'm going to go back into our base for this and make sure that this is going to be bright enough. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the slate gray again, and we're going to put a second highlight on here. And I'm going to go right up to that edge, and this time we're going to make it a little bit smaller. This is almost going to look like white. And I'm kind of dragging it back and forth instead of using a circular motion because I want to make it look like a sheen. We'll do the same thing over here. And we'll make it just a little bit wider. There we go. This will not get anything else because it's in the back. Now I want to make sure that these edges are dry, and then we're going to come back in with our graphite, and I'm going to shade over here. And I want you to see how I've got just a little bit of that edge glowing through. I don't want to lose that edge. These are small floats. But it's already starting to roll the hat back. I'm putting out some lamp black. And I'm going to float right on the inside edge right here, separating this. Keeping that very narrow, and then I'm going to just fill in back over here. Lots will come along this edge and bring it down. I'm on the outside edge over here. And I'm kind of just curving it around a little bit. I'm loading what I call 2 hairs on my brush, and we're going to have a nice narrow float coming right underneath here. And then I'm going to curve this around and walk it back. If you can't walk out a float, you could dry brush this area. So what I want is shade, middle tone, and then the highlight colors. Then I'm going to come up over here and shade back over here. And that will stop right about even. So this is on an angle here, here. You want it to look like it's all part of the same hat. I'm also going to put a little shade back over here. So let's take some raw sienna and shade the sides over here. So I have raw sienna and I'm shading the hatband. And even though I'm going to put cogs over here, I'm going to still shade this because it might show through. And I am pulling it like this to kind of just give it a little bit of texture. I'm like chisel pulling my float. Now I have cadmium yellow, and I'm going to do a little zigzag highlight. And I'm going to flip my brush over. This is a flip float. And you can see all the highlights are kind of lining up together then. Now I'm taking a little bit of burnt umber and I'm going to walk this out just a little bit, but not as far as the first one, and then I'll just do a little bit of that chisel pull, put just a little bit on this edge. Okay. And I want to make it look more metallic, and I'm going to add zinc into it. And I'm going to do 2 parts zinc to 1 part black, and I'll mix that together. And I have a sheet of 140 weight mixed media paper. And again, I like how smooth it is. And I've covered it with the gray color that I have listed in your pattern packet. And then I have a seawool sponge, and I've already dampened it. Now, when I squeeze it, there's no water coming out of it. So what's important is it's just damp. And I'm going to dip it. I'm going to dip it into this black metallic color that I created, and then I'm going to offload it to make sure that I can make just some really nice light stipples, and we're going to stipple all around, or sponge all around this surface. I'm allowing some of that gray background to shine through. Don't press too hard, otherwise you won't get this nice texture. And what I'll probably do is 2 of these gray boards to make sure that I have enough for what I want to do with my Steampumkin. So once this is dry, I'm going to come in with some sterling silver, and I've cleaned up my sponge and it's still just damp, and I'm going to sponge over this. And now I'm going to come in and just very lightly add the sterling silver. I'm not sure if it's going to be really obvious, but I'm using ever so light of a touch, and this is how my sponge is loaded. And I barely touch down. Again, this is adding more depth. And then the last coat is going to be the extreme silver, and I'm going to put a coat of this, 1 or 2 coats all over this until to me it looks like galvanized metal. So what you can see is as I'm putting the silver on, everything that's underneath is going to settle down, and it's just going to look like it's the texture of the metal. And this is only going to need 1 coat. But you can see here it looks like there's tons of texture. Here it just looks like it's galvanized metal. In your e-packet, you've gotten these templates. And I'm going to transfer the mask onto the galvanized metal. So you can see that this looks like it's a piece of metal now, but what I want to do is I want to make sure I don't have any weird edges, you know, so it looks like it's nice and smooth. So I'm going to come and I'm going to sand all of the edges, making sure it's nice and round, convincing the eye that this is a piece of metal. So I have some zinc loaded in my brush, and I'm just going to go around the outside edges where I just made them nice and smooth. And we're going to get rid of the white color of the paper. We're going to shade the mask a little bit, and so what I'm doing is I'm mixing some silver into the graphite. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm shading underneath here. And I'll shade on the inside. Then I'm going to just fill this whole area in with this color. Now this is pretty much a flat plane, but I'll just shade around the outside to make it look like it's rolling back a little bit. And if this is a little choppy, that's fine because it's going to add to the texture of the metal. And I'll also just shade this little tab right here. I'm going to fill that whole area in with this dark color. And I'm thinking that's good for now. I'm going to come in and add some black floats to make these a little bit more dark. And then I'll also reinforce what's on the outside edge just a little bit. Again, I'll go ahead and I'll purposely make some choppy floats, adding to the texture. So on this piece of mixed media paper, I've mixed together the Extreme Sheen Champagne Gold and the bronze to get this really neat golden tones. And because it has bronze in it, it's going to lay down really well with the original orange color that I did. So you can see how pretty those look together. And I know that I'm going to want to make some rusty brads. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that same black color that we mixed, and I'm going to just go over the back part of this. This is going to be for our goggles, and then I'll have more than enough to make some brads with that. Once this is dry, I'm going to come in with the media line quinacridone gold. And this is going to be fairly transparent. I will apply multiple layers. I'm going to come back in with some of the bronze, and I've got my sponge again. And I'm just going to come over very lightly. So let's see if this is going to start looking like some rust now, or rusty metal. And it is getting that effect. So I'm painting inside of the wood canvas. I'm not going to be too worried about what's on the outside here, because I'm going to come in with full metal strips. And so I've come in with the gray color, and I've just base coated the sides black. And I'm going to come in, and we're going to create some galvanized metal in here too. And I will simply do this in the same manner as I did the paper. So then once I'm done in here, what I do is just kind of stip the insides a little bit. No one's really going to see what's going on the sides. But I don't want it just to be harsh black. So I just picked up a little bit of black in my brush, and that's fine. We'll just create a little bit of texture along the edges. It's just going to make it look more worn. And actually that was a really nice happy accident. And then I'll just come in and soften it with a paper towel a little bit. And it's already starting to look grungy and a little bit old, but it's starting to definitely look like galvanized metal. So I'm going to be using this gear stencil by Studio R12, and it's number 155. I've loaded my stencil brush with some lamp black, and I'm going to just pounce in. I always pounce in the beginning in case I have too much paint in my brush. I'm not really going to put anything in the center because I know that my Steampumkin is going to be there. So let's see how that's looking so far. That looks good. Not just have a hint right there, that's fine. I'm going to let that dry and then I'll turn this around and put some over here. And I rinse my brush out, and I'm going to lay that down there, and I'm going to get these right in here. And I'm going to use my black gesso. So I'm going to come in, and I've got my palette knife on an angle. I'm just creating a little bit more dimension. This is really nice and thick, and it's because it's old gesso. Chances are yours is going to be a little bit runnier, but it needs to be thick enough so it's not going to bleed. I'm going to lift that up, and so you can see it's looking dimensional, and the fact that it's all black is hard to see, but we're going to come back in and do some more. Now I'm afraid to continue doing this because it might mess that up. I'll put a couple down over here. Okay, so I'm going to have to hold this in place and keep this up. It would be much easier to just let this dry. So I'll do both of these sides. This is just like frosting, it's wonderful. You can also get black modeling paste and do this. Modeling paste takes a little bit longer to dry. And I'll lift that. Okay, so I'm going to wash my stencil off so this doesn't dry, and then I'm going to let these air dry, and then I'll go in and I'll do some more corners over here, and I'll be back. So what I have right now is something called Quick Cure Clay, and what's really neat about this is you can work with it and it's not going to dry until you heat set it, but you do need to have a heat set gun in order to use it. Other options would be Quickwood, which is a 2-part resin clay, paper clay, which is very natural and less harmful, polymer clays. You can use whatever clay you choose. I just had this on hand, and so it's available on Amazon, and you can use this, or like I said, you can use whatever you want. And now I've laid some randomly through the background. And what we're going to do is just press it in, and this is what I've done already. And then I just pull it out. And it's forming like little irregular shapes for quite some time, and it is not air drying, and I love that. If it's super hot outside, you might be able to heat it up, or you might be able to cure it, but you'd have to leave it in your car in the sun. But again, I will be using a heat gun. And I just want this around the outer edges. It's going to look like texture that's been built up, corrosion. Now I'm going to come in with a text stamp. This is newsprint text stamp. You can use any kind of text stamp you want. This was by Steampumkin. It's a 4x5, I believe. They now make it 6x6, which would probably make it even easier. And I'm going to press this into the clay. And so you're just getting a really cool texture. Oh, the sides are making it, yeah, texture like that. I don't know if you can see. And I'm going to do that all around, and I'll be back. Okay, so now you can see the cool textures that this has created. And you can either use wood or metal cogs. I'm going to use a combination of both. These I got from Copper Distributing. And these, all the metal ones I got from Hobby Lobby. They have something called spare parts, and I believe it's in their scrapbooking or paper section. They also have some pieces that are like a clock. You know, they have a variety of things, of gears and cogs, and I'm going to just use a variety of them. And what I want to do is I want to impress them into the clay before I heat set it. I have not painted my cogs yet. So I'll impress that, lift that up. Now I know I've used that, so I'm going to put it to the side, and I know exactly where it's going to go. And then I think over here, I'm going to use a metal one. And I'll simply do this and play around with my cogs and make the impressions, and then I'll show you how I heat set it. Okay, and so what you do is you take your heat set tool and I'm going to begin just going back and forth, and then all of a sudden I'll notice that there's a little bit of smoke coming up, and then I know that it's pretty much set. I'll let it cool, I'll touch it. As long as it's hard, I know it's done. So some of the areas where I rubbed it really hard with my finger have turned white, but if you come in with a dampened paper towel, it will come right up. And so you can see the underneath colors, which is good. Okay, now as soon as this is completely cool, I'm going to come over and paint over it. And now what I'm going to do, it's all completely dry and it's nice and hard. You can hear how hard it is. I'm going to take some of that black and silver mixture that I had before, and I'm going to try to keep it on top of the clay. And I'm going to do this to all of the clay areas, and I'll be back. One thing I want to point out is I'm really using a stippling motion to make sure that I get my, and a very, very old brush, and I'm going to make sure I get it in all those little grooves. And this is kind of what it's going to, whoops, you can see I missed a little bit down here. But if you don't push on it as if and pounce on it, it's not going to get in those grooves. And the whole idea is we want those grooves to be nice and metallic-y dark. So I have some Silver Spark metallic luster. And mine was kind of dry, and so I just reconstituted it with some water, distilled water. And then I'm going to take my finger and just go over the top with that. Let me zoom in so you can see how nice this is. And I'll bring it on to some of the raised areas where I had the black gesso before. So you can see I'm just pulling my finger over the raised areas. And I'll pull my finger just over some of the black raised areas. I'm going to come in with some other metallics too. And so this is just the first base. So I'm going to come in with some iced espresso and add some warmth in here. Just every now and then, so you can see it takes away from a little bit of the silver color and adds some pretty warm tones in here. And I'm going to do that all around, and I'll be back. Now it's time to start doing some constructing, and I've already glued the painted cogs and gears in the background on top of the clay areas. And I'm going to take these 1" by 12" strips that I cut from the galvanized, the faux galvanized metal that I created, and I'm going to glue them onto the outer frame. So I have my 8" hole puncher, and I have my rusty paper that I created, and I'm going to just stick this in and punch out a whole bunch of these little brads. And then when I'm done with them, I'll just like put them on, open them up and put them on here. And then to glue them on to both the mask and the side, this is the side, I've already started doing it, I just use an old paintbrush, and I go about 1 inch apart. Then I'm going to come in with that same paintbrush and just, they stick on really easily. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to be adding some 2-part resin into these wonderful goggle parts. And but one thing I wanted to say is when I work with any kind of resin, I make sure I have eye protection on, because you can easily irritate your eye and get eye infections. I've done that twice. So what the goggles are going to be is, these were caps from, we get spring water and distilled water for our Keurig. And so these are the caps from the water bottles. And I first coated them with the paint adhesion medium from Deco Art. And then I came in and I put a couple coats of black on the inside. Then on the outside edge, I put the same color as the goggle eyes. So you want to make sure that you really coated this because we never know what kind of plastic this is. And the bad thing about two-part resin is it can actually make plastic disintegrate. So I'm going to be using two-part resin. You can use something like this, the Envirotex Light, where you pour it and it's a little bit cheaper that way. They also have a epoxy adhesive that's a two-part resin. You could use that. And what I like about that is it's very similar to ice resin, and this is ice resin. What I like about having the plungers is when you pour them out, you're automatically going to get equal amounts. Now this is a little bit old, and so it's turned yellow. I'm not going to worry about that for this project because it's not going to show up. I would not use this for jewelry. See, but that way I've got the exact equal amount, and now I'm going to stir it for a few minutes, making sure it's completely mixed. That's really key. I like ice resin because of the plungers, as I said. Because if when you're mixing it, if it's off just a smidget, it's not going to harden properly. And so that's kind of the trick with working with the pouring type, where like the Envirotex Light. So this is all filled with bubbles, and I'm going to just let it set for a couple minutes, and it should, a lot of the bubbles should dissipate. But what I'm going to do, because I know I want to do a two-part, so there's a little edge in here. I'm going to fill it so that edge is completely done. And I'm going to swirl it around so it gets on the inside lip. And this is going to be my first pour. Because then I'm going to come in and I'm going to put some cogs in, or gears, for the eyes. And I just cover that. Now, it's going to take about 12 hours for this to harden. And a trick to get rid of the bubbles, if you have too many, is just to blow on them with your, just to blow on them and go, and it will start diminishing the bubbles. And you can see it must be the moisture from your breath. But that's really good. We're going to just leave that like that. Then I'm going to put the cog in once it starts hardening up. And then I'll pour more, and then we'll have some wonderful glasses. It's time to start constructing everything, and I'm just kind of laying it out. So I know where I'm going to put all my metal cogs and gears. I'm using a blend of things I've gotten at a craft store. Again, I got a lot of these at Hobby Lobby. Most of these are their spare parts and very inexpensive. You can also get things by Tim Holtz, cogs and gears by Tim Holtz. There's just so many out there. You can look in your in the jewelry section too for different metal findings. And so I'm going to take this apart really quick and set these to the side. I'm going to go ahead and leave, these are my eye goggles, and the resin is in there, and I put the cog on top of it once it hardened and glued that into place. And so what I'm going to do is just barely set that in. So these are just poking through a small amount because we do want them to be raised up. And then I've kind of got an idea where I want my cogs to go. I'm going to move the head over. I'm going to glue these into place, and then I'll be back. Before I put the mask into place, I'm going to just put a little line to indicate that that's a screw on both sides. And then what I want to do is I want to position this that looks good, right like that. Bring this down just a little bit. I don't need that high. So what you can do is you can actually cut popsicle sticks and build them up. You can use these foam adhesives, and so what I'm going to do is turn this over, and I know I'm going to at least double these up, so it's not going to look very pretty underneath, but it really doesn't matter. So I'm using 2, and I will put these around so that I'm supporting the cardboard. Okay, I have these all lined up on here, and I didn't put a lot over here because I've got the cogs over here. Now what I need to do is line this up without letting them stick, because they are sticky for a reason. See, so that set them up really nice. Now I can go ahead and put my goggles back in. I suppose I should glue those into place. So now what I'm going to do is just put a glint in the center of the cogs. And again, these were the wooden cogs, and all I did was take a little bit of black or paper and painted the whole center black to make it look like a pupil. And now I'm going to just take and put a glint. Make sure it looks round. And I'm putting that in the 10 o'clock position on both of them. I have his nose I'm going to glue into place. And this also was a wooden cog that I painted. I'm going to hold that into place because over here we have a little bit of those foam things, and they're not letting me put it in the position I wanted to put it in. Now from this golden sheet, I did create the goggle eyes, and I cut strips from that. I just cut a long strip from that, and then I cut like 1/2 inch. I cut about a 1/4 inch strip from that, and then I cut approximately a little bit less than a 1/2 inch along, and glued the little circles onto them. And the circles I simply created using a hole punch, and then I created a whole bunch at once. I glued them together like so. And then I glued them onto the goggle eyes. So this one's going to be put on a little bit differently. And I want to make sure that this is going to be on the outside edge when I glue it on. I'm using Eileen's tacky glue. You could use E6000. I stay away from that because of the fumes. You would not want to use hot glue for this because we're working with plastic cups and it would melt it. So we're going to just put that into position, make sure it's nice and secure. Then what I do is I take bigger things like this that are heavy and I know aren't going to fall over, and I weight them down and give them a little bit of time to dry before I add other things. Okay, and I have a little feather I thought it would look really cute, so I'm going to put this in with the cogs. And then I'll put this cog right on top of that. And then I can set this into position. I've come in and I've just taken my Identa pen and outlined the little squares that were in there. Now I'm going to come in just behind here. I'm coming in behind the dark areas and just do like little stitches. I love working with Identa pens because not only are they waterproof, but they're also a permanent marker, or opposed to something like a Sharpie is permanent, but it is not waterproof. So I've decided that I don't have enough dimension in my eye goggles, and so I'm taking a mixture of the Extreme Sheen Antique Bronze and Burnt Umber, and I'm just putting it along the back half. I'm just trying to make the inside circle pop out just a little bit. And it would have been much easier to do this before I put it on. But sometimes we need to step back from our designs and realize that we need more depth in different areas. Okay, and then I'm also going to go in and I'm going to just make the circles a little bit darker too. And I'm going to come in and do the other side the same way. Now on the upper one, I'm going to just come around it with some Splendid Gold. And this is not going to change the overall effect of the color, it's just going to make it a little bit lighter. You can see that's really starting to make it look like there's different dimensions in there. And I'll do the same thing over here. And then I'll do the same over on the side. I found this wire at a craft store, and it's nice and flimsy. I don't know what gauge it is. It didn't have it on it. All I'm doing to form the wire for the mouth is I'm turning it and keeping it nice and tight, turn it into a spring. This is the easiest way to do it. Eventually splay out the spring or the wire when I put it on. But you can see it's going to look like that, and then I'm going to just slide it off and put it on the pumpkin. So I slid the wire for the mouth off of the dowel rod, and then I just bent it in an up and down manner. And you have to be really careful when you stick this underneath this, remembering that this is not metal. And so I just put some glue in here, and I flattened out the one edge and stuck it way back up in here. And over here I put the end underneath these two and glued it into place with some E6000, and then I also put another cog on top of it. So I gave you a line drawing for the hook, and all I did was transfer it onto the faux metal sheet and then outline the lines with an Identi-pen, and also filled in the centers with the Identi-pen. I also then simply glued this chain to make it look like it's an eyeglass hanging. And then what I want to do is I want to give it some support. So I have a product called liquid glass, and this is also going to give it dimension. So what's going to happen is I'm going to come around very carefully and just outline it, making a little circle. And then I'm also going to outline the circle down over here. It's going to give it a little bit of dimension. And then it looks like it's clear right now, but it's going to dry. It looks like it's foggy right now, but it's going to dry clear. And I'm also going to take this and put it on top of the screws. And again, it's going to dry clear, so it's going to give those dimension. I'm also going to come and put them on top of the brads, and it's going to make it just look a little bit more dimensional, like it's a real brad. So the question is, why didn't I fill the eyes with this? Why am I just using it on the brads? Well, to fill this entire container with this, it would be very cloudy. And my experience has been when you use a lot of this, it stays cloudy. It never really gets clear, where the ice resin or any two-part resin is clear automatically, and it dries very hard to the touch. Liquid glass will not dry nearly as hard as ice resin would. But you can see now, I've already started giving this a little bit more dimension, and when it dries clear, you will see that it just makes them look a little bit more real. So I have some more ice resin, and I'm going to pour it just enough to cover the cog that's in here. So I can see that this is not level. So I want to keep this as level as possible. This will convince the eye that these are actual goggles. So all the liquid glass has now dried clear, so you can see that these just look like little brads now. It's very convincing that they're actually dimensional items. And then this is also hardened, the ice resin has also hardened. So now I'm going to go ahead and put him in here. And so what I've done is I've added the foam things on the back, and I'm going to just put him in the place. And then there, we'll push it like that. And then as a finishing element, I'm going to simply, glue the cogs on the outside edges. I like the brass. If you wanted to make some bat wings and put them underneath the cogs, that would be neat too, but I'm thinking just having those and maybe a few more here and there will be great. So I'm going to glue those into place, and I'm going to call him done. Thank you so much for joining me for this class. I hope you really enjoyed it and learned how much fun it is to create faux metals using metallics and regular acrylic paints. And I hope you enjoyed learning how to create dimensional art using found elements around the house and some things from the craft stores. So we'll see you in the next lesson, and until then, may painting always bring you joy.